Hello again. I'm Tripp Rogers. He's the Hall of Famer Mike Scheck. This is the Fantasy Sultans podcast, or video podcast, actually. And we are now less than a week till the start of the NFL regular season. And this is when fantasy players get all juiced up because it's Christmas Day, birthday, New Year's Day, all thrown into one. It's time for your fantasy drafts. And this is one of our favorite shows where we talk about the fantasy drafts. We talk about what to do. And if you had a fantasy draft over the weekend, on Tuesday, you were very, very disappointed because chances are you may have wasted a high draft choice on Jonathan Taylor and found out you're not going to be able to use it for 4 games.
Yeah, that's a big deal for fantasy managers who have to deal with that. You just never know. I mean, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, how difficult it would be with him. And, he was an avoid player at that point, and I still think that he's an avoid player. He's going to be out 4 games. So do you really want to risk reward? Could pay off big dividends down the stretch, and we've seen him go as late as a round 4 pick in fantasy drafts. Could be the biggest value player on the board if he turns out and shows up on the field this season and puts out and cranks it out. But I'm just too worried about the risk side of it rather than the reward side of it.
I think the other part of it, though, if you look at Indianapolis, first off, he's coming off of ankle surgery. So that's one of the reasons why he's on the PUP list right now. He's trying to get back from ankle surgery. Number 2, you have a rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson, who is starting for the Colts. You have a wide receiving core that is marginal. I don't find anybody on that Colts receiving core that is, oh, I've got to draft him. If anything, you sit there and you agonize over whether or not you want to take them in the later rounds for depth because they're not really that good. I mean, this is as close to a one-note Charlie football team as you have. And a lot of people were on the Jonathan Taylor bandwagon last year. I'm one of those guys, and I got burned. I got burned greatly on Jonathan Taylor. Luckily, I was able to dump him in a trade, and I was so thankful I was able to get out from under that. It was just an awful, awful year last year. And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be another awful year for Jonathan Taylor. We're taping this on the Tuesday evening, so the cutdown day occurred just a couple hours ago. We are hearing bits and pieces. One of the more interesting strategies that we have seen by a couple of teams is essentially they have one quarterback on the roster, and that's their starting quarterback, and they have cut all of their other quarterbacks, which in the case of New England, well, it's kind of surprising since Mac Jones is not a proven commodity. The Kansas City Chiefs, let's be realistic here. There's Patrick Mahomes, and, you're playing Patrick Mahomes on one leg. He's that good. He is that good. But you kind of wonder, the grass is always greener on the other side, and it could be that's what people are thinking about in terms of quarterbacks. But this is interesting. I mean, I don't, is there a cut that you kind of said to yourself, wow?
No, I don't think there was a cut that kind of said, wow, but we talked about it. You and I chatting back and forth earlier today with the Nick Folk situation. I ended up drafting him. We'll touch on our drafts, slightly now, but go into it in deeper when we get through all of our drafts next week. But I did do one draft and drafted a kicker, Nick Folk. He is now in Tennessee from New England. So we'll see how that works out. Questioning my pick, maybe, but it could be working out for me now.
Well, I definitely agree with you. And again, one of the issues you have in doing a draft before final cutdown day is you could end up finding one of your players. Again, more than likely it was somebody in the latter rounds that you maybe took as a depth pick and found out that they got cut. And it was somewhat surprising. But again, think of it this way. If you're in the average fantasy league, and the average fantasy league has 12 teams, multiply that times 16 rounds, you're basically going 144. Is my arithmetic wrong? You understand
Yep.
where I'm going with this.
Nope, it's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
but again, so you're not going that deep into it. And again, the best fantasy managers, I mean, the draft is important, but the draft can hurt your team tremendously. But what you do during the season is what's going to make the difference. And Mike, you've said this always, and you preach this. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's you can certainly lose your league on draft day, but you're not going to win your league on draft day. You can lay the foundation for a good season, but again, you're going to have to make some moves, and sometimes you get really lucky. And draft strategy is what we're here to help you with the Fantasy Sultans. Now, we're going to break again. We're dealing with average leagues, which are 12-team leagues. There are some that are less, and if you're in one that's less, keep in mind that the talent pool will not go as you. There will be more of a pool of talent if you're in an 8-team or a 10-team league. Although 10 team leagues tend to kind of you get towards the not head scratching, but you're sitting there really kind of going, do I want to take this guy? 12-team leagues, that kind of is a sweet spot. 14, again, you're gonna have to go hard and find some hidden gems, as the old saying goes. And again, that's what we're going to do with. We'll break the draft down into 4 different, 4 position groups. And we'll start it off with the Hall of Famer who, in the Sultans draft is drafting number 1.
That's right. And I have a big decision to make whether or not it is going to be Justin Jefferson or Christian McCaffrey. I mean, to me, when you take a look at this kind of strategy, it's heavy at wide receiver at the beginning part of the first round. You're not going to see the running backs until mid to late. I think that's where you're going to see. And there's only going to be 4, I think, maybe 5 at the most, but generally about 4 running backs that are going to be taken in the first round. And that will be Christian McCaffrey, of course. It's going to be Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, and Nick Chubb. Now, you may want to throw Josh Jacobs into the mix. That's a possibility, being that now he has signed with the Raiders, and it's looking like, well, it's not looking like he will play the season. So, he could be added into the mix. But again, early will be wide receiver. So if it's not Christian McCaffrey, then it's either Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or Cooper Kupp. I think those are your early guys that you're kind of looking at here. And I think the strategy as you're drafting early is either this. You come up with the big 4, and what I call the big 4 is running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end. You're getting a mix of everything. And this allows you to fill the biggest positions early. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, you got to go 2 running backs. You got to go 2 wide receivers. Maybe you try to sprinkle in a quarterback, in the 5th round, or a tight end. And that's a good strategy too. And that's a good fallback strategy. But I always like the idea of coming up with 4 solid positions. So if you can grab a Christian McCaffrey or a Justin Jefferson, then you're going to go with the opposite pick in round 2. And then in the 3rd round, you want to come back with a quarterback, or try to get a quarterback at that point, because you could get Patrick Mahomes, you could get Josh Allen, or you could get Jalen Hurts. So again, we don't know. Mahomes is going to go first off the board, the earliest. I don't know about Allen being there, but Hurts will probably be there. So if you can get a quarterback at 3, maybe get Jalen Hurts. And then in the 4th round, that's where you go for your tight end if you're going to use that big 4 strategy. However, if you are going to go with the 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, that can go in any combination. But again, like I said, Tripp, it's going to be wide receivers early for the first 3 picks in the round 1.
And the one thing also real quick, especially if you're drafting on either end of the draft, and I'll say this is picks 1 through 3 or picks 10 through 12. Okay. Remember, you're going to have 2 picks relatively close together. And the danger is if you pass, and let's use quickly use the example that you had the other night. You were drafting on the one end of the draft. I think it was 11. 11. Yep. Okay. And I said to you, grab a quarterback with your second pick.
Yep.
Because I said, otherwise, the train's going to go and you're not going to get a good quarterback. At the time, Jalen Hurts was the only one off the board. And I said that to you, and I said, grab Mahomes, because I think your first pick was a
Tony
wide
Pollard.
receiver, right? Yeah. Pardon? Yeah.
Tony Pollard.
Tony Pollard. Yeah, it was a running back. That's right. Yeah. So in that case, I'd go quarterback because I think there's more wide receiver depth to get later on than there was quarterback. That's just something to think about. Now, let me take one of the middle positions, 4 through 6. I'm drafting 4 in the Sultans League. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to get the top 2 wide receiver options here. I might be able to get a running back here. That might be what I'm thinking about. Austin Eckler looks like he's a guy that would be slotted in here for me. But let's also throw in Mr. Travis Kelce. Now, in the tight end position, there is Travis Kelce. Then there's a fall off. And there's Mark Andrews. Then there's a fall off. You don't want to think about a tight end probably till the 5th round. So that's the other part of this is I might think I want to go tight end here. But again, the danger is I've got to get if I do tight end in the 1st round, I'm going to have to come back with a running back, because let me tell you something. Running back is a position that's going to dry up very, very quickly. Mikey, you were perfect on that. 4 running backs that you can consider drafting in the 1st round. Wide receivers, you probably got a pool of 6. Throw in a couple quarterbacks, throw in Travis Kelce. There's your 1st round. So I think from 4 to 6, I may think about Kelce, but probably I'm looking at Austin Eckler. And again, I might stretch a little bit and go Nick Chubb. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain it a little bit later because of my strategy. But in the 4 to 6 positions, again, you're going to want to probably stick with 2 and 2 if possible, or you want to have at the end of round 4, you want to have 2 running backs, at least 2 running backs, wide receiver, maybe a tight end, maybe a quarterback. All right, Mike, position 7 through 9, same kind of feeling. You will have a bit of space in the middle of the draft to think about. If the quarterback train starts, you can jump on it at that point.
I would definitely jump on it at that point. And the thing is knowing where to get that quarterback and when to pull the trigger on it. I think that's the issue. And I think, my draft the other night, I was thinking Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I was kind of keyed in on that because I was thinking, maybe, these quarterbacks will fall, but, not thinking about it, you kind of second guess yourself. But yes, certainly quarterback is something to think about. Another position, Saquon Barkley's right in that wheelhouse between 7 and 9. Bijan Robinson will be there for running back. But again, I'm one of those people that are not on his bandwagon. I just think that there's a lot of risks coming out. He does not have much experience. Atlanta will use him, but how much they use him, how do they utilize it? Remember, this is an offense that misutilized Kyle Pitts for a couple of years. And just, we question Arthur Smith, but, we just don't know what's going to happen there in Atlanta. And then, could Stephon Diggs be there in that wheelhouse, or CeeDee Lamb, although I'm thinking that's more towards a late pick for CeeDee Lamb. But, you never know. The thought process of everybody is different. We kind of bring you the insights of what we're thinking. We kind of take a blueprint. We look at the numbers and then kind of analyze it to see what we think is the best fit for the positions. But yeah, again, I think you're going to see probably 2 running backs between 7 and 9.
Yeah, and you talked about Bijan Robinson. He's getting a lot of love here on fantasy. People are talking him up a lot. And again, I agree with you. I'm not in love with the Atlanta system. I'm not in love with the Atlanta team. You have a quarterback that is unproven, so I don't know if I'd stay with him. Now, I get the last part of the round, and again, you're on the end. So you've got to make your picks count. But again, when you're on the backside of the draft, your choice may be made. It depends on who's there. Also, keep in mind, you will have 2 picks relatively quickly. So while you'll miss out early on the big guys, here's a chance for you to make some hay. And again, from 10 through 12, you want to think 2 wide receivers. You may want to start that quarterback run. Not a bad idea with that second pick. Don't do it with the first, because if you do, you may instigate other people. Let me put it this way. If you're thinking to grab a quarterback in those first 2 picks, make it your second pick. And I say this because if you jump the gun in your first round pick and grab a quarterback, you are going to have, depending on where you are, but still somebody who's after you, somebody's going to draft before you, and they're going to freak out. Unless you're in the 12th position, then it doesn't matter what order you do. But I'm thinking more 10 to 11. If you grab a quarterback there, then you've got 1 or 2 guys who may think, oh, I'm going to grab a quarterback too. And while it may help you, I think it's going to panic people. Whereas if you waited, you could probably get yourself a stud, either wide receiver or running back, and then get your quarterback. And if you start the quarterback run, everybody else is going to freak out. And that's when you're going to make some hay, because the more quarterbacks that are taken later on in the second round, and when it whips back around to you, you're going to have a chance to pick up some nice guys. And again, we talked about it last week. First 4 rounds, you said it again, Mike. There's a reason why you're the Hall of Famer and I'm not, because you said it great. You want to have the key positions. You want to have a running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and a tight end after 4. Now, again, if you have 2 running backs and you have 2 wide receivers, well, that's not bad.
No, it's not the worst in the world. No.
I think if you're going to get 2, if you're going to go 2-1-1, you want to have 2 running backs rather than 2 wide receivers, because I think that's going to hurt you in the long run. That's one of the key things to keep in mind. The running back pool is not very deep. And if you are stuck trying to take a running back, your second running back, in that 5th or 6th round, you're going to be in trouble. That's not going to be a position you are going to want to be in. You are going to want to have 2 running backs, preferably by round 3, so that way you can sit there and just pick off wide receiver value. Again, you could even wait on a quarterback. You could wait on a tight end, but you have the options to do it. If you're in the 5th round and you have to get a second running back, no, that does not bode well. I think if there's one thing we want to emphasize on this, you got to have 2 running backs, 2 starting running backs by the time you hit the 4th round. Would you agree with me on that? Because I think if you wait to the 5th round, unless, and again, 1, so 3, 4, or 2, 3, 5th, unless you're drafting number 1 overall, because you'll get that. No, that's too late. Yeah, you want to have 2 running backs by the 4th round. I mean, after the 4th round ends, you want to have 2 running backs. I think that's a key. The only way you wouldn't is if you are in the position I was just talking about, 10 to 12, because you would have 2 picks relatively close together. So I don't think you're going to lose a lot of value there. I really don't. Mike, a lot of this is about players. When we talk about players we want to avoid, we talk about players we want to key in on. We talked about that last week, and we'll be talking about that ad nauseum. Give me two players who you want to pick. Like, I know if you're in a couple of fantasy leagues, you key on certain players. You want to have them on each of your teams. Who are two you want to pick?
Well, I think one of them should be Aaron Jones in Green Bay. I mean, last year, all Jones did was gain 1,500 scrimmage yards and catch 59 passes, averaging 5.3 yards per carry. I mean, talk about a slacker. But I mean, the past 4 years, it has been positional finishes for him. So, and I dare you to go ahead and name 16 other running backs that are better than this guy, because you can't. So, I mean, he's definitely a player that, you know, you want to take a look at. And I know a lot of people are questioning Green Bay, but let's not throw the towel in just yet on Jordan Love, because, you know, we haven't seen a lot from him. And, you know, everybody's panicking. Oh, well, he's a step down from Aaron Rodgers. Well, maybe he is a step down from Aaron Rodgers, but, you know, it's not all doom and gloom yet in Green Bay. So I definitely think that Jones, and plus Jones will take the pressure off of Love and that offense. So, you know, you feed the ball to Jones, and then you open up the play action, and that'll help out Jordan Love there. So, he's one of the players that I definitely am looking at and definitely want on a roster. And another one that I like is Jahan Dotson from Washington. He missed 5 games last season, but he finished as the 17th best at wide receiver over 12 games. And, you know, Eric Bieniemy is now in that Washington scheme. So I think that's going to help. The only question mark would be Sam Howell in Washington at quarterback, because I think that, you know, that's going to affect the receivers. But from what we saw last year, and they worked with, you know, Carson Wentz was there at one point. And then, you know, you had the Taylor Heineke experience in Washington. So Jahan Dotson, I think he did pretty well last season, given, you know, the early injury, came back from it and played well.
One thing about Washington, Sam Howell, I think is going to surprise a lot of people. Again, they're in the NFC East. I mean, in the NFC East, you have the Philadelphia Eagles above all everybody else. I mean, you're the champ to get knocked off, and Jalen Hurts. Dak Prescott is serviceable. Daniel Jones, not bad. Sam Howell, again, a question mark. He only started one game. He started last game, but I thought the quote this week, which was interesting, Ron Rivera said, if I knew how good he was, I would have started him sooner. I think it bodes well for the wide receiving core. And the other thing about Johan Dotson or Johan Johnson, Dotson, is the fact he's also got other pieces around him. You got Brian Robinson, and so he doesn't. It's not like they can double team him. You know, Washington has some good talent there on the offense. I'm not saying great talent. I said good talent. Okay, two players I'm looking at, and I know you're going to be shocked, and this kind of plays into what I was saying about Nick Chubb earlier. I like Deshaun Watson. I think he's going to have a good year this year. I think Cleveland is ready to contend. I didn't say they're going to win, but after all, they are Cleveland. But I think Deshaun Watson is ready to surprise some people, getting a lot of love from the guru. And so I will give him some love too, because I like him. He's the quarterback I want to get. Now, I'm going to go a 1A on a quarterback. And I know this is going to surprise. No, it's not going to surprise you. What am I wearing here? The New York Giants quarterback, Daniel Jones. I think the Giants have improved their offense. You still have Saquon Barkley. They've got an exciting group of wide receivers. I think Daniel Jones could be a good one. And here's the other reason why I liked, because I drafted him in our draft the other night. But one of the reasons I like that pick is because Jones has a week 13 bye. So you could draft one quarterback. I mean, if something happens to Jones, obviously you have to get another quarterback. But I really think he'll be serviceable. I don't think he's going to be great, but again, he's a guy you can sit back and wait and draft. And again, I'm talking about sitting and waiting into round 10, possibly. All right. Two people we are avoiding at all costs. All right. And I'm going to go with, I will start the avoid at all cost round of things. Okay. Dak Prescott. Okay. I think Dak Prescott is, in some people's minds, believe it or not, the third quarterback in that division. Some people's minds. Fantasy wise, Dak is just, I mean, I had Dak 2 years ago, big disappointment. Last year, Dak was okay. You know, there are some other quarterbacks that are better. I think one of the things about the Dallas offense, and again, we'll see a difference because they've changed offensive coordinators, but Dak Prescott really has not shown me anything. And if you're in a league that has penalties for interceptions, Dak Prescott's gonna hurt you, and he's gonna hurt you in the long run. So I think I'm avoiding Dak Prescott. And the other thing, I know this is going to be a surprise, maybe not, but I am staying away from anybody on the Arizona Cardinals offense, because that is, I mean, that's not good. Kyler Murray out for 4 games. Well, Kyler Murray is basically off of everybody's radars at this point because of the knee injury. But there's nobody in Arizona that has shown me anything or any reason to draft them. And I would stay away from the Arizona Cardinals, if only because of the fact, I mean, rumors have already started. They're trying to tank. And they've got a rookie head coach in Jonathan Gannon, who was, of course, with the Philadelphia Eagles last year. He was their coordinator, one of their coordinators. I would avoid the Cardinals. Is there anybody on that team worth drafting? They've traded away everybody who's good or cut them. No, stay away. Avoid at all costs.
What about Miami's Tua Tagovailoa?
Oh,
look, I mean, if he's healthy, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to put up the fantasy numbers, but that's a big if. And when he's healthy, I mean, we've seen it before. The injuries happen, and we saw what happened to him last year with the concussion injuries and overall lacking durability. I mean, even if you do decide that you want to take a flyer out on him, you definitely want to come up with a backup quarterback as an insurance policy. That would definitely be, and the Sultans don't always agree to take 2 quarterbacks in a league. We always feel that maybe we can come up with a quarterback off of waivers down the line when you need them on a week, on a starting quarterback's bye. But I mean, in this case, if you really have your mindset on Tua, you better come up with a backup quarterback. And I'm also going to go with Keenan Allen in Los Angeles. Age is a factor for Keenan Allen, and injury also has to be considered in this too. Allen is 31, coming off a limited season of production. Great route runner, but there's a new guy in town, and his name is Quentin Johnson. So he's going to be stealing a lot of the carries away from Keenan Allen. Now, I'm not going to say that Keenan Allen's going to do terrible. I just think that there's a lot of question marks surrounding him. So he's one I would avoid. And, I'm going to toss in a third. How about Mike Evans in Tampa Bay? Tom Brady is gone, and talk about a downgrade at quarterback to Baker Mayfield. Ugh. I just don't feel that Tampa Bay offense is going to do that well this season. Rashad White might do well.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just say the only guy in Tampa who you'd want to think about is Rashad White, because no, Tampa. There's another one to avoid, but part of it also is, the offensive line is really going to be the key. Offensive line is going to be a huge factor in this one. And I think that's one of the things that would make or break Tampa Bay. And that's why I agree with you, okay. All right. We got a few minutes left here on the Fantasy Sultans podcast. And as always, we'll leave you with some tips and things to think about. And, I want to play off of a couple things you said, Mike, because you were just talking about, drafting Tua, and you need to draft a second quarterback. Yes, most definitely, you are going to. But pay attention to your bye weeks, because, again, Daniel Jones is a Week 13 bye. So I'm going to go with one quarterback. But the thing you need to keep in mind is some of these rookie quarterbacks, everybody's like, oh, yeah, let's grab these rookie quarterbacks. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Well, they're taking up a bench spot. And seriously, if you draft a Daniel Jones, he's got to give you decent production. And if he stays healthy, you won't have to worry about getting a backup quarterback. Now, if you have gone through and can't find anybody to draft in round, 14, 15, 16, defense kicker, drafting before, mistake. Drafting, you have to have one. But again, that's the sweet spot. So if you want to have a 16th round pick and you want to Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, yeah, go for it. But you don't need to take two quarterbacks. Same thing with tight ends too. Although tight end may be a position, because again, tight ends get injured a lot. You may want to think about grabbing a second tight end. But I mean, I've gone to the season with, again, coming out of the draft, I have more than enough running backs, more than enough wide receivers. I got one quarterback, I got one tight end, one kicker, one defense. That's more than enough. Keep that in mind, but also know what everybody else is doing, because I think the thing that surprised me the other night, and again, most draft software has a feature where you can check what the other teams are drafting, and keep that in mind. You really need to keep that in mind, because if you're the last one who needs to draft quarterback, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Hall of Famer, because you did that. You were the last one to draft a quarterback. I've done that in drafts too. And again, if somebody else is going to take another quarterback, that's going to mean somebody of value is going to fall to you.
Oh, most definitely. And, when you go ahead and do these mock drafts, because obviously you want to mock, and we told you that on our last podcast, you definitely want to take some chances on your strategies. You want to play out all the angles. Basically, we say it once, we say it 1,000 times. You can prepare and over prepare, and it would still turn out to be a different type of draft. But you still want to get an idea of how things shape up. And if you are not satisfied with your maybe first couple picks in there, and try to change it up. I think that's a big thing. Another big thing is, and I've noticed when mock drafting and over the years too, if you're really not happy with the players in the pool, think outside the box. And, I'm not one to take a defense in round 8 or 9. You don't do it. You just don't do it. But could you take a defense in maybe 12 or 13? Yeah, I think you could. Because you're going to find that probably the top couple defenses are going to go before like round 11 or 12. But you could still get a top 5 defense at 12 or 13 if you are not happy with the player pool. And again, it depends on everybody else's situation. But, I would definitely look at that as a possibility. But definitely, if not, then like you mentioned, I totally agree with that. Go with if you have a 16-team league, go with a defense in round 14, kicker in round 15, and come back with Mr. Irrelevant in round 16. That may be the way to go. Because I think if you wait until 16 to get a kicker, depending upon what spot you're in coming back from the 16, if you're at the back end of 16, you're not going to get the best kicker. Now, does it matter which kicker you get? Not really. Maybe a difference of a couple points. So I don't think kicker is that big of a, everybody's like, oh, you got to get a kicker early. No, you don't have to get a kicker early, because there's no significant difference between the top kicker and maybe the 15th best kicker. I don't think it matters.
I think what you want to focus in on is a kicker who is with a team that has a good offense.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic here. They may not be, and we've seen this. A lot of kickers have gotten cut, And so they're going with some unknowns. And again, these unknown, if they're with a team. Now, again, the other part of kickers is that, some teams go through 2, 3, 4 kickers in a year. So that's one of the reasons why don't waste a high pick on a kicker. I think you're right, Mike. We're running out of time, but I want to say this. If you're going to draft, between kicker and defense, take a defense before a kicker. I mean, the defense is, how many teams do you know of that have 2 kickers on their roster? That's my point, is what I'm making. You got plenty of choices. You can stream kickers, not a big deal. And that's going to wrap up the Fantasy Sultans now for this week. Again, good luck in your draft. We wish you the best. If you want to reach out to us, please feel free to email us. That's thefantasysultans@gmail.com. Don't forget, I have another podcast called Tripp's Take. You can catch that on Spotify for podcasters. Also, Apple, Google, and on Amazon podcasts and Audible. And if you like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you can join me on my radio station, WTRS Radio, powered by Live365.com. We wrap up the Fantasy Sultans to giving you the information that you need. We try to help you win your league. I mean, we may not be very successful, but I think we're very successful in giving you the tips you need to win your league. Enjoy your drafts, and remember one thing. He's the Hall of Famer, Mike Scheck. I'm Tripp Rogers. We are the Sultans.
And you are not.